warm welcome, don't we all? It's really wonderful to be back with you and to share again some ideas I have of working with flowers. And I must say that my inspiration always comes from, well, first of all, the title, which we've named Spring Beauty for this program. And we are on the verge of spring. But when we look at the landscape at the moment, what we see is pretty much bare branches, and birds' nests are very vivid in the trees. So my feeling is that the pieces I would like to convey will be things that reflect the idea of nesting and the newness of spring with very soft, gentle colors and lots of branches. Because bringing flowers into the house as a decoration is not just add beauty and fragrance and all sorts of sentimental feelings, but of course we're bringing a little bit of nature inside. So we absolutely want to, I think, relate to what's going on in the natural world. And that's very much my influence, because I am a wildflower preservationist as curator of Wildflower Island. I will just say that I hope to welcome you all, if you've not been to the Wildflower Island, to come. We are happy to be working along with Westchester County and the Native Plant Center this year. The week before Mother's Day will be Westchester Wildflower Week, and that will culminate with our plant sale at T-Town at the end of that week, Friday and Saturday, which will be featuring native and nature-friendly plants and things that are really beneficial to wildlife and not at all invasive or wrong. So I welcome you to pick up a flyer about the Wildflower Island. I always hope to have volunteers for guides that are knowledgeable about wildflowers, although we give complete training. You can start knowing nothing. I did. I was a floral designer with all the flowers I ever saw coming to me from other parts of the world. So it was really fun to learn the things that really should be under my feet here in this New York area. What I'm doing is I'm taking a square liner. I'm trying to take a square peg and make a round hole, I guess. But to start with my branch feeling, I'm turning this into a kind of an inexpensive container, because I hope that you'll raffle these pieces and I don't need to take them back home. But this is an interesting kind of branch wired ribbon, honestly. So I'm installing this to give a little bit of a disguise to my plastic liner, because I am going to use floral foam. And even more to disguise, I want to install, I played around a little bit with this with green moss, and I just found it to be very, very messy. So instead I will take 2 variegated aspidistra leaves. I think 2 will help me get away with it. Don't really need the stem, because I want to make a lining of this. And I will just install. So it's going to read green at this point. Of course, one of the main things about design is that we want to have a certain rhythm, and the ribbon has given us a continuum of grid that I don't really want to have disappear. So now when I install my floral foam, we will not be looking at foam. But this is very lightweight, so the foam does a couple things for me. It adds a little weight and strength to the base of this and grounds it. Also, it will give me stem support. This is a slightly tapered square container, so I will carve a little bit off the bottom and see if this fits nice and tightly into this, hoping to have it just a bit above the lip of the container. Whenever I'm working with foam, unless I absolutely plan to do strictly straight up and down, I like to have a little foam above the edge so that I can work into the horizontal and come out in more than one direction of line. While I'm starting this with probably my most foolish investment, only because I thought, gee, this is neat. Nice, straight, perfect pussy willow. I paid almost $10 wholesale for this, and I didn't know till I got home. So it's like the star of the show, believe it or not. Anything going into foam has got to have a point. So I am going to make a stand of pussy willow. Again, repeating the idea of rhythm. Might as well use the pretty ones. There's a little bit of curve. Everything in nature is trying to reach for light if it's growing, and will have some sort of a graceful bend to it. So part of rhythm, again, is to follow that bend. and have it work in a very smooth and pleasing way to the eye. This is a good opportunity for me to mention that my garden club, New Horizons, which meets at Laston Park, is doing a workshop on basic line design open to the public, and that will be February 12th. You can speak to me after if you're interested. I'm the person to contact for that because I just became president, and that's kind of neat. I will from time to time turn this around because I am creating a look. This is exactly not what we'll teach at the workshop at Laston. I have a friend who tells me, well, I never got a blue ribbon for a flower show design for the garden club until I realized all you need is a stick, a flower, and a leaf. And I'm going way beyond that. I think you want to see some creative work today, so you know, I'm starting with many sticks. What's nice about these is that they are so perfect. I, of course, purchased them a couple days ago so that they weren't quite as fluffy, the catkins, which is great because I was able to put them in water and allow them to develop as far as I wanted them to. Once these are allowed to really develop, they eventually want to do what all plants are meant to do, which is turn to seed and regenerate themselves. Just looking at the beauty of them is not what their job originally is meant to be. So without wanting these to actually go all the way to turning into solid stamens, I, at this point, would pretty much interrupt it. I don't think it will draw enough water from the foam real quickly to do that. So I've used the prettiest ones with a little bit of a flare, and I've created almost a vase shape, a little bit of a funnel to install my next thing, which is a little bit common and ordinary, but a color I've never seen before, which always excites me. As much as I like things natural and not genetically fussed with when it comes to wildflowers, what they do with cultivated cut flowers is pretty wonderful. So this is a beautiful purple. It's changed so much in the fluorescent light, honestly. And I'm going to kind of repeat the idea that I had started with these branches, and they're not all the way open, so there will be a little bit more spread eventually. Grabbing these all in my hand and making a real quick topiary form. Very easy. And you know, carnations are not super expensive, so you can get a really sophisticated, dramatic look. And whenever you work with basically one color, you absolutely don't have too many decisions to make, so I think it's a fun and easy way to design. Pretty much getting a nice lollipop form here. I, of course, conditioned these, so many of the bottom leaves have been removed. The trick with carnations is that they have these nodes. They're jointed, which makes them very brittle at those spots, and they can sometimes break. You want to try to cut the flowers, especially for insertion into foam, between the nodes so that you're not making a larger hole than you absolutely require. And, of course, I'm limited with my space. Now, here's the thing. Usually when you're putting in something large into foam, it's going to make such an enormous hole you can't change your mind, and you generally start that way. But I wanted to have this framework first. So actually what I will do as a little trick is take a rubber band, just to aid me. Broke that guy. Okay, he's got to go. Told you it was brittle. But I'll put another one back in. Cut it again. Try to get things, once I cut them, as quickly as possible into my moisture source, because like ourselves, these living things want to seal up and, you know, try to hold on to their essence. Now, I've installed that, and I can't change my mind, so I'm pretty happy. I hope it's straight enough. And that's okay that it's breathing a bit, because these flowers are not completely open. At this stage, I will release the rubber band because I don't find it to be attractive. It was just a helpful tool. Okay, these aren't going to cut rubber bands. Let's try this. Now, to get a little bit more visual balance, I would like to continue with that woodsy feeling and a little bit of the same color with some heather. Very shrubby, you know, so you get a lot of mileage out of a stem. And I'm going to tuck this in just a little bit. Not enough to completely hide the graceful levels of those joints in the carnation, but to just start to bring a little color down closer to the bottom, not to make it too fuzzy. It's interesting because generally one of the last things you install into a design is what would be your filler. It might be greens. In this case, it's a small, delicate, soft flower. Kind of faked a basket here. Now, because it dries rather well, I am going to weave a bit of it into this ribbon. This is a line material in itself. It's very spiky and pointy, where the carnation is a nice round mass, so I think it makes a pretty terrific contrast. But I would like, this I think I can actually get into the foam, to have my wandering heather sort of follow in a ring. I hope that's looking like it's working. It feels like it's working. Maybe one more piece. I do just remove a little bit of the bottom growth so that I have a chance to easily point it into the foam, and that leads me to a very important point, that you must cut at an angle. Anything, no matter how fine. In fact, the smaller the stem, the more important it is, because that means it will pierce the foam and stay in place. If it's a blunt, flat cut, it makes a hole, it moves around, it defeats your whole purpose of using the foam to hold your stems. So always, always a point. Okay. Since I'm feeling like warmth is of the essence, I would like to continue to green and hide that foam a bit with Ming Ming fern. And this is, of course, very puffy, very soft. I can divide it enough that pieces can stay tucked low, not to hide the pretty catkins of the pussy willow, which is really one of the very first things to come out in the spring. I'm very fond of it. Come back to me.
What is the green thing you're using?
Ming fern. And that's all I know about it. It sounds Asian. I'm not interested particularly in drawing out a long base here, because I want this to be a very parallel, sort of vertical feel. So I'm keeping this a little bit contained. And also, I've gone to the trouble to make the bottom of it, I think, a little bit interesting, so I certainly don't want anything dripping down too much to hide that work. I can probably get 2 pieces out of every little frond here. I would be surprised if this is really a fern, honestly. At Wildflower Island, we have a fern trail with over 30 varieties of ferns, and they're very nicely labeled. They come out a little bit deeper into the spring. The early ephemerals, of course, are the first thing we'll open in mid-April for, and then the ferns sort of come along a little bit later, which is nice, something to see at any time. Now, I do want to just give a little bit of meaning and grounded and focus by installing a couple. You know, it would be the perfect time to use a few that had broken. I mentioned how they're sometimes very brittle and easy to snap at those joints, but I didn't have the advantage of taking and recycling a broken flower head, so I'll just cut it to make it work for me. And I think I'm happy with that just as it is. Happy spring. This is something pretty neat. It's a beech wreath. It's made on a heavy-duty wire wreath form, and you can certainly see the rhythm of those bunches of beech being added to that. One of my favorite trees because it's, in some cases, still hasn't dropped leaves. And when you're in the winter woods, and I do work on Wildflower Island all year long, to hear the rustling of those beech leaves is just very kind of musical, which, of course, I like. I have my book and CD of my music here today, if you're interested. I am going to use a design bowl which holds a block of foam with nice little plastic grips, so it's not necessary for me to tape this in place. We just won't plan to turn it upside down. It fits really very well into the center. Perhaps to make it easier to move, though, I will slide a disc of cardboard under the base. And this is becoming my nest for my flower design, or a very abstract sort of basket. And eventually, whoever adopts this piece will have a nice wreath to work from. So it will go through the seasons, I think, quite well. And I would like to use a little color here. And my thought is a little bit of Caspia, or when I first started in the flower business 30 years ago, we called it status. We called it purple status. It only came in purple. And now, of course, just like the carnations that they have changed with color science, they have been able to grow this in many beautiful soft hues. And I just think yellow is very gentle and springy to me. I want to follow, absolutely. I'll build it from time to time, and then I'll hold it up for you to see. But it is going to be sort of a centerpiece idea with a little bit low. I want these curls to go the right way. It's not going to. And I am always going to do a piece relating as much as possible to the container. So I'm following the form already set up, because this branch, of course, is a natural material, so it's definitely part of the design, beyond being a container feel. But I don't want to mask it. I want this to just be a touch of the yellow, to start to bring the center of this outward. And I'll do a little bit of Ming Fern, since it's in front of me, to hide the plastic bowl. Now, flowers and foam have to be watered every day. It's not enough water to support the life system of the flowers alone. It's thoroughly soaked so that we can be safe to install our flowers. But two things. The flowers, first of all, must be well conditioned and hydrated, where they've had a good drink. Overnight is ideal in water, a vase or a bucket or something, because they have to be on their own, ready to stand in the foam without expecting this to supply them with their first drink. I don't mind if the carnations were a bit tight. They'll keep going. So that's just a little, I think, soft feeling, almost like moss coming over the base of this. And I want to continue this idea of rings. This is almost turning into an Edwardian approach with Alstroemeria. Just a few. I didn't take the time to do this, but we would strip all of these generally when we're using them, when they're kept tall on the stem. And the reason for that is, as with the chrysanthemum, the leaves turn yellow quite quickly, and yet the flower lasts weeks. So if you can allow them to have that fresh appearance as long as possible. Of course, I had to slide the plastic back up over these so they wouldn't freeze. I do like leaving the upper bracts or leaves around the flower. I don't want it to be completely void of any foliage. I think that looks unnatural. But it is a very pretty flower on the stem when the stem is all clean. So my ring of this. I never do 4 at the bottom of a round arrangement. Can you imagine why? Exactly. I want it to be round. So I tell my students at the botanical garden, 5, 6, 7, anything but 4, please. Well, that's a nice curvy one. I don't want to cut that one away. That has a great line. And these are almost completely open. They'll go a little bit further, but I have enough of a feeling of what they'll take up in the space of the piece. So even at this stage, You could put your punch bowl on there and be happy, couldn't you? I like a little different texture going on. I apologize for having to put things in two different boxes. So I'm going to contrast with that Rosita pink Alstroemeria with some Hypericum St. John's wort family. We grow 4 different varieties of St. John's wort on Wildflower Island that are native. And this is a situation where the leaves will actually turn black kind of quickly, so don't be afraid to strip them also if you work with them tall in the vase. I like it as a contrast to the shape of the lily. It's not a true lily. It's called Peruvian lily sometimes, but what I'm really talking about is the Alstroemeria. It's got a nice shine to it, which is a contrast to the fuzzy fern. And the Caspia, which the yellow, it tends to be a little fuzzy. And it looks a little bit like berries. Oh, it is berries. Almost looks like eggs in the nest, though, doesn't it? So that's my next touch. Very, very simple. And I think I'll just finish this. The Blue Beauty, which is going to definitely, eventually, kaboom. And I don't have great luck with these in water sometimes, so I really don't mind cutting it short. And the leaves are nice, so I'll keep them. I'm just going to reflex them a little because, again, they were very enclosed by being held into their plastic wrap. Yay, for that one, it's 20 degrees. Maybe could be shorter. You know the rule, you can't extend something once you've cut it, so better to start a little bit long and then change your mind. I think I'll leave that because I absolutely know it will relax now that it's unwrapped. And my last touch for that is to give it a little bit more random line with bear grass. I'll try not to take an hour doing this. I'm going to install it, cut all held in my hand together with one point and stick it in, but I have to switch because I'm right-handed, so that it's only going to make one hole. And then I'm just going to tie a little bit of this off. This is my ribbon for my basket in a natural way. This also will dry, so. What I love about bear grass as it dries, it gets a little bit celadon green and curly. So it's fun. It's fun to watch it change. I have 4 kittens, though, and they go after anything I would have in the house. This is the one thing they would go after, so be careful if that's the case. It's very sharp. Very sharp.
Can you tell us which parts of that bouquet will dry successfully and which won't? It should be replaced with something else if you want to use it and dry.
The Alstroemeria will not dry. The status should, and in some cases I've had the Hypericum berries do well, and other times they turn black. So I can't guarantee, but they may dry, and it's interesting. The ones that I had over the holidays, which were more dark, they even have one that's called chocolate. It's almost brown, and when that gets darker, it's beautiful. But this light one, I don't know what's going to come of it, but there is a chance. And of course this bear grass and the hydrangea. So the fern doesn't. It'll get all drippy and you'll be glad to pull it out. One more. Because I don't want to do 4. There's such a trend to run grasses and things all over the tops of arrangements. I prefer to just keep it a little bit on the edge, winding. At this point, I might change my mind. I think the last time I was here, I bound all these into a bird for you. So rather than repeat that, I think I'll lift a few up. It's very kind of flat, isn't it? These are pointy enough, they'll go well. Yes, could use a fresh cut. See, even the tiniest frail thing that could possibly spring out will do okay if it has a good point in its cut, because it'll just grab onto the foam, which I'm not hitting apparently. I'm sorry. I'll recut it. I'll get myself a fresh start and go for a new hole. not quite as critical with greens as it would be with flowers, but once you've got your stem inserted into foam, it's very possible that that foam will clog it to a certain extent and not allow it to re-drink. So when you do change your mind and reinstall it into the foam, please be sure to give it a fresh cut. This is like too perfect now. I'm going to release a few on purpose. So we just have to finish our nest with a couple of lovebirds, which will be coming back to us. So I have some cork and mushroom birds that are actually looking very natural. Yes, and this is a pair. I'm not going to glue them or anything, so don't let them fly off. But it becomes a focus, and it also brings the brown back into the center. It's a nice low centerpiece, be beautiful on a coffee table. Thank you. I think it could almost also hang. I get excited when I see something in a new color I've never seen before. I want to work again for a moment in my hand with some flowers that are gentle. I have some tulips here that are parrot tulips. The 1600s there was quite a tulip market. There's even a story about a fellow who gave up his blanket to protect his tulips. They were so valuable that he ended up freezing to death without his blanket. The tulips were fine, apparently. But the parrots would be very coveted, or anything striped, and because it's so unusual and they have no idea how it happens, although more recent science has come to determine that it's probably a virus, actually. But very, very beautiful. It is going to do a little bit of a fooling around thing because it's phototropic and it will bend to the light. It also keeps growing about an inch once it's even placed in foam. It just keeps growing and growing. What I'm doing is stripping off some of the foliage so that I just have the more firm pieces, because I don't want to design with this where the leaves are so important. And I might do, but it's kind of looks like a, Easter egg kind of thing, which is fun. So that would be 5 and 5. That's the rule. Well, I would prefer not to have perfect pairs, so I will do 6, excuse me. Yes, I don't have 10. Never mind. I'm doing different numbers so that I have 2 different dimensions here in size occupancy. And I want to do these as little bouquets in my hand, honestly. I have Genestra as a filler, very, very fragrant, kind of broom-like, yet to open, so there's some nice future here. And it will make a very pretty match to the tulips because it's the same color virtually. Now, I know I don't need these so tall, so I'm going to take at least 1 stem and just cut it down, because once I start building this in my hand, I have to keep holding on to it. There's 1 bouquet, potentially. This is not such a strong yellow or such a heavy flower that it becomes too overpowering working with other things. So I'm actually using 2 fillers here, but that adds to softness. I'm doing an accompaniment here with 2 very springy color green vases that are kind of fun. I'll take the designer labels off. They are spun acrylic, so they're not as fragile as glass. They're not as heavy as glass either. But they're fashioned to hold a tube. So we'll put some water in here. Since tulips don't behave, it's better to, I think, work them this way than in foam, where you have trouble changing your mind as days go by. Do this so you can see me. So I'm just going to gather. I'm a little bit restricted by the size of that tube, you see. But it's a round tube, so certainly the flowers will go to all directions. And it's very contemporary looking in feel, so I think the tulips are a nice sculptural type flower that will open and will change and become dramatic. Perhaps I could do one touch more, and I think what I shall use is the lady's mantle. Interesting flower, Alchemilla mollis. Alchemilla, which just like it sounds, alchemy. This flower was thought to be magical in the early herbalist teachings because it doesn't exude moisture as vapor when it has excess moisture. Instead, it comes forth, and if you have this as a ground cover in your home, you know that the droplets of moisture are held onto the leaves and make beautiful little dewdrop tears at the very edges of the leaves. And the mollis part of the botanical name means soft, and it's very, 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 very velvety and soft. And the flower itself is, of course, so gentle and delicate. But they thought that originally this flower could use to turn base metal into gold and cure all disease, which would lead to very prolonged life. So it really had quite a reverent history. And of course it brings up a little bit of the color of the container, just as I did with the birds and the pilsy willow bringing up my branchy ribbon. I like very much to integrate into a design some of the container if it's a strong color. I think either completely contrast or show that you mean it and you know, use it a little bit. I think I'll make this the tall one. I could add more to it and change my mind. Oh good, I do have a little more space. Okay, so there's one. I'm sure the water coming out is just displacement. I'll start, I think, this time with the filler. What do they say? I read that the dewdrops are pearls that falleth in the night. And because this one's wider, I'm going to allow my tulips, which have the bend, come on, eventually it will. You know how they keep growing and they just grace themselves onto the table and sort of die with drama. There's so many tricks to keeping them from opening and keeping them from growing. I mean, I've heard you put a little clear liquor in the water, you can put pennies in the water, you can wax the bottom, which is often done for bridal work because the flowers have to be out of water for a time. But I think let nature do what nature does. One of the things about flowers that makes them such a luxury to us is that they're fleeting. That is why they are so, so special. They're not meant to be a long, long, long lasting thing to enjoy, because I already told you it's all about making seeds. This is not the moment the flower's after, but it was on its way until someone decided to pick it. I will even cut these at a point because the tulips are rather stubby and flat, and that will be a little more difficult to install into this tube, which I hope I haven't overshot. Good. Now, because my flowers are well conditioned, I don't expect them to swell much more as they continue to drink. Nor will they drink these tubes dry in one day. I hope not. But do keep your eye on such things. And I'll spread that out just a little bit. And by golly, I only have one more, so why don't I put it over here where I have a little more space and maybe create a little more height with that. And then decide how something like this for a long table could be done many, many, many going down the hill. Oh, I forgot to put this over here. I was missing it. Easy to put in something skinny now. Bringing that one up taller, I've decided. Just when you want it to be really bendy, it's not. I suppose I should have conditioned it like that. And that's the other thing about conditioning flowers that haven't had a drink yet. You can take your tulips and tie them in a knot, wrap them in wet newspaper, and get a really strange and abstract sculpture out of them. So I'm just going to, with the warmth of my hand, I hope, encourage this to do what I want it to do. Just a touch of that, because I really am just about maxed out. I'm adding the bear grass. It's probably not long enough, but my plan is to actually marry these together. Because love is in the air. But you get the idea. Nothing's curly when I want it to be curly. We have a lot of container. So I feel I need to give a little relief to that by bringing something down here and cascade. And oh, I can do my trick too of sewing it through a little bit, I bet. Let it do what it wants to. That's a big rule. Anyway, that's a different look of a bud vase idea. They go together. So I have a dish that's nondescript, so it pretty much will disappear. It's dry, hopefully, because I want to put foam into this, but I don't want to have to tape it in, which will cover so much of it that I will have difficulty installing my stems through that. So I'll show you a trick. I have anchor pins. Happens they're put out by the same company that makes the foam, but they're like the little plastic things in pizza boxes that keep the lid from smashing the pizza, so you can recycle those. Floral cling or clay or stickum, many, many names. What I do with this, and this is most important, and you may have seen me do this before, I'm going to actually just roll this slightly. My little worm. And put a ring around the bottom. I don't even care if there's not a dash of this stickum in the center, because what I have to do is create a water seal. And if water is able to get up under this little pin, it will absolutely pop the foam right off, or the pin will come off. So I'm thinking with this size brick I should probably use 2. I want to be a little bit asymmetrical, so I will put it off to one side rather than smack dab in the center. I don't want to do that too much because the oils in my hands may hinder the adhesive quality. We actually have an orchid growing on Wildflower Island that's called putty root. And it's so interesting because a plectrum hymale, and hymale means of the winter. In the winter, it sends out its leaf. Not so unlike this, just a little bit smaller. Very, very rigid. And the leaf is out all winter, and then it completely dies away, and the flower comes up as a raceme of orchids in the spring. So it's just kind of funny that part of its beauty is when you don't expect to see anything green coming out of the ground. And that startles some people. Not that we're open in the winter, but it's fun to watch it come and go. I always look for it. It's one of my favorite things to do when everything else looks like it's asleep. My foam, I'm using Instant, which has Instant Oasis with little holes on the top. I actually prefer the holes upward because I think that just makes adding the water yet easier. It will accept it right through those holes nicely, although it's not really critical. It will take water from all directions. It's perfectly soaked. Again, I want to start with my larger elements. So I have an amaryllis. Beautiful. And I don't mind those dried bracts. I think that's part of the natural scene. But I have fooled around with this a slight bit. I've impaled it with 2 bamboo sticks. So it's not going to get top heavy and so you know what? I'm not going to pull those out and show you but they've swollen in the water, which is good. But I have to cut this at an angle. And because one of the characteristics, if you've ever had this in a vase of water and watched it, it splits at the bottom and starts to curl outward. So I'm going to sort of center this. I think I'll have it looking toward the center of the bowl. I'm eyeing it to be as straight as possible with an important vertical thrust or line in a piece. You, without a doubt, want to be able to feel like it's balanced. And before I get too far, I will do a little bit of greening. And I'll use the bold leaves to give me some additional line. Distra. It used to be a really popular house plant in Victorian times, along with ferns and palms. Don't see it so much. Absolutely. In fact, in the real, well, they're not usually too developed in the spring. I would prefer to use hosta leaves because it's something you can actually pick and enjoy. He's got fuzzy from the fern, I apologize. I'm creating now a little bit of a vertical to go with my horizontal, but I'll bring a little bit of a lift up here. And my thinking is that's a huge hunk to try to cover, so I'll actually shave some of these corners off and round that a bit. I need the strong base to anchor the weight of this, but it's going to be too much of a box to have to cover. And in keeping with this, I will, I believe, sweeten it with Ilsa rose. They only had one of those at the wholesaler, so I thought, well, what else can I do to reflect that? Well, a spray rose reads a little bit, isn't it beautiful? Yeah, it even smells nice. It's going to read a little bit nicely the same color. What I'm doing now is just spreading them, because even though there's more to open on each stem, some of them are not as full as others. So it's possible to have one that might work very nicely higher in the piece. This one leaf is damaged. And then build the less full stems coming down lower. So we always say biggest at the bottom. So if I had some that were really open, I would, without question, want to give them influence at the bottom. Notice I'm using a knife on the roses. It's very important that the roses get a nice long cut. In a perfect world, we would actually cut them underwater. Reason why an air bubble can get up in there and knock them over by being trapped here under the calyx. I need a little more strength, so I will take this one and pierce it, so I have a loop. Isn't that fun? I might need to do that again. Although this time I'm going to help myself out a little bit. I should have listened to my own self. Cut it to a point, right? It'll pierce through better. I have to sort of see where the rib will allow me to get a graceful curl. And I'm trying as much as possible to hit the center, but it doesn't have to be dead on. And I'll do one of these, maybe here. I just happen to have more of the hypericum. This is an instance where I am going to strip it because it's such a nice, sleek, clean, light stem, and give a little rise to this and bring some of the green. Yes? Hypericum, St. John's wort. It's turning out to not be all the way around. That's kind of fun. Ooh, that's nobody. Sometimes I start at the bottom and work my way up. Other times it's building outward and downward. Let's see what I have here, biggest at the bottom. So I think I will extend one that's more fine. Oh, that's great. That's got, I'm going to get rid of that. And reinforce that line. A bit more. This is nice and thick. Step this down. Okay. I think I would like to sharpen this with, well, one more anyway. Gonna have to hide some of the foam further, so I have miniature pittosporum that's variegated, and it's going to be delicate, and I think in a nice relationship to the variegated aspidistra. We have both colors going on with our greens here, which keeps it kind of, I think, light looking. And this is my means to hide the foam, so of course I'm starting low and connecting it to the edge of the lip of the bowl to get a good harmony. I'll do it on this side predominantly.
Leah, do you build it so it looks good and from every angle, or?
Well, in a perfect world, yeah. I have decided not to try to make it all the way around, because I think with the one sort of focal point of amaryllis, it's definitely looking a certain direction. But I don't believe in backless. I think that it's a three-dimensional piece here, and that we want to be able to appreciate that the bowl is round, and you know, your eye may wander. I don't want anything to be dead flat in the back, unless I'm using a square, a rectangle that can go flush up against a wall. I've changed my mind on this suddenly. Since I've changed my mind, new cut. Put it over here. That's better. And I love that that touches the table. Two things that determine what you're going to make is where it goes and what you put it in. And so this is flat and low to the base, so I really have to appreciate that this is going to grace the surface upon which it's placed. So whenever something reaches down and touches the table, it really looks like it belongs. Okay, and maybe I need to might as well finish the roses, I'm thinking. But I like the elements to have a little bit, especially in a contemporary sort of feeling here, a little bit of rhythm to them, so that, sneak this one down in. I sunk that one low for depth, and then I'll put its other partner back out a little more extended. Originally they started out together, so they're kind of back together. But if your eye can follow the dance of the certain element in the piece, it really makes for rhythm that is really, really important in design. And maybe I'll put a rose higher, just to step that up, to sort of frame the stem but not hide it entirely. And I'll finish it with what I have left of my soft green. And to get a little more impact, because this is so fine, like I did with the bear grass, I'm grouping it all together. Give it a little motion. Feature it here. It's a true filler now because I'm doing it at the end. Don't be afraid to divide things. Now I have to remove some of these leaves so I have some bare stem to install. And I'm thinking this needs to balance and drape right here. Work it through. Just a little more leaves in the back, because I don't like seeing that foam. Really, really object to that. It's not professional. Also, by blanketing the foam, you get much more longevity, because the air is not going to blow it dry so quickly. And anything you can do to help keep the moisture high in your flower arrangements is vital for its the length of time you should be able to enjoy it. I think I'm ready to quit on that. Oh, thanks. Oh, no, I'm not. I'll accept that, but I really, 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 really wanted to pull in the line. I knew that there was something. And this is pretty great. Oh, I ought to take that to Lasden and make someone deal with it. This is curly willow. Very sleek. Because my base became rather broad, I always like taller more than wide, so I'm going to give it a little bit of a height lift. See, that wowed it, didn't it? I had to do that. I really, really had to. And why not even let it help support? That's broken naturally, so we clean that off. And that gives it some random, beautiful, not only lift, but interest. So this is one of my, no, thank you. This is one of my favorite line materials because it is so striking in its motion. Okay. Voila.